An attack on innocent civilians in the dead of the night. Emergency workers struggling to identify victims and body parts in the rubble of an airstrike. Parts of the Tajoura migrant detention centre were brought to the ground. Many inside had no chance. Those who did survive rushed to recover their few possessions. The centre held at least 600 men, women and children from other countries. Refugees and migrants who'd fled other horrors, violence, persecution and economic repression in the search for a better life.
All what we know is we want UN to help people out of this place because this place is dangerous. There's some people that are stranded here. They don't know what to do. They don't know where to go.
The UN says there needs to be more than just condemnation. A full independent investigation to determine how and why this happened, to bring those responsible to account. No one has yet claimed responsibility. But the UN-backed government in Tripoli is blaming Khalifa Haftar, a renegade general whose forces have been fighting for control of the capital for more than a year.
It is simply not acceptable that civilians are targeted, that the target of military action are area of the town where it's known that civilians are present and living, and therefore knowing very well that the likelihood of high civilian casualty is very high.
But the victims here had no part to play in the battle, and yet they paid the ultimate price. Well, that coming into CNN from award-winning journalist Sally Hayden. She's one of Forbes' 30 under 40 who is in near contact with people in Libya stuck in some of these detention centres. Right now she is in Kampala on assignment. Sally, horrifying listening to that young man. Any update on how he is?
I don't actually know how he is. The last time that I heard from him was about 5 a.m. this morning, but I've been talking to other people who are in Tajoura and they're all just completely devastated. One said that he had to help collect the body parts of other people that he knew, and I think morale is just so low they almost don't want to talk about it anymore.
I know you've been in touch with people in this centre and centres like this one for months. What have they been telling you, Sally?
They've been calling for evacuation. I've been in touch with dozens of detainees who are across Libya since last August, and that entire time they've been calling for evacuation. They're saying that they're not safe, that they need to be taken to a safe country. And certainly since the conflict broke out in April, they have been saying that they really, really need to get out of there, that something like this was always going to happen.
I know that you've had text messages, as I understand it, from a number of migrants. Let's just bring up one of those. We don't get any solution for drinking water, and then you go on, how long without water? Almost a month. We're drinking salty water for washing clothes. Is it making people sick? You said we don't have a choice. And I know you've had other text messages just describing the sort of conditions these men and women are living under. Who are they, Sally, and where are they from?
So the people that I'm in touch with are mainly people who would count as refugees. They've fled wars or dictatorships in countries like Eritrea, like Somalia, like Darfur in Sudan. And I think it's worth pointing out as well that a lot of the photos you see might be of men, but there are women and there are also children. From what I know, there are more than 1,000 underage people in detention centres right now, and they're also living in the middle of this conflict.
What do they know about this conflict that's going on around them?
I mean, they know a lot because their life essentially depends on it. They knew when Haftar declared that he was going to advance on Tripoli. They know which kind of places his armies are fighting in. Also, I think it's worth saying that a lot of the detention centres are actually being run by militias. So there are fighters who are coming in and out of them. In some, there are weapons being stored in them, and that's putting the migrants in huge danger because they know that they're very vulnerable as targets as well.
What sort of help are they getting, if any? And who, as far as you understand it, is running these detention centres?
The detention centres are officially being run by the Department for Combating Illegal Migration, which is associated with the GNA, the government in Tripoli. But, I mean, effectively, like I said, they are being run by different militias. Some are in areas that are controlled by Haftar's forces, and some are in areas being controlled by GNA-aligned forces. And, yeah, effectively, they're just trapped in the middle of that.
Sally, your reporting is incredibly important. Sally's reporting oft-times on social media, flushing out the conditions that these people fleeing oft-times for their lives are enduring in these camps. And as we now understand, losing their lives overnight, certainly in an attack. Sally, good to have you on. Thank you for that. This hour, the International Organization for Migration leading the charge on condemning this airstrike. They're calling for a full and independent investigation. They want those found responsible to be held accountable. And they, along with other UN agencies, are dispatching medical and other response teams to the area. That's, of course, if they are given appropriate clearance from Libyan authorities. Well, let's bring in someone in charge of the IOM, its Chief of Staff, Eugenio Ambrosi, joining us now live out of Geneva. We understand these detention centres are officially run by the department at the Tripoli, the UN-backed Tripoli government. But it's clear, as Sally was pointing out, that quite frankly, that's not really who they are run by. The UN-backed Tripoli government have blamed this attack on General Haftar. Do you have any evidence to support that claim?
No, we don't have any evidence as to who is responsible for this heinous attack, which is the reason why, alongside with UNHCR, we have asked and we continue to request that this be thoroughly investigated by the international community and those responsible be found. It is simply not acceptable that civilians are targeted, that the target of military action are area of the town where it's known that civilians are present and living, and therefore knowing very well that the likelihood of high civilian casualty is very high.
Let me just sweep one thing up here. You said, you know, it is unconscionable that civilians are being targeted. Is it clear whether this was a targeted attack or horrifyingly collateral damage in what is this incredibly messy conflict? Is that clear specifically?
It might not be absolutely proven, but I think it is clear that it was very well known that that detention center was in that area. I understand that in the vicinity of the detention center, there was some military camps or some military installation of the GNA, which presumably was the likely target of this action. But the fact that the detention center was there was definitely known. It is known, and therefore we continue to consider it unconscionable that that area had been targeted because of the likelihood of civilian collateral damage was extremely high, and this is exactly what has happened.
Our viewers are looking at a statement from the UN Commissioner, High Commissioner for Human Rights. Michelle Bachelet says, and I quote her, "I have repeatedly called for the closure of all migrant detention centres in Libya, where UN human rights staff have documented severe overcrowding, torture, ill treatment, forced labour, rape and acute malnutrition, amongst other serious human rights violations, as if we needed to describe any further human rights violations. There will likely, sir, be viewers watching tonight asking why people continue to risk their lives, whatever their circumstances back home, trying to transit through such a dangerous place as Libya is today. If this is what they can expect, how would you respond to those concerns?
Well, I think the first consideration is that in many cases, what they leave behind appears, at least to them at the moment of leaving, even worse than what they might find on their way towards north and towards the coast of Libya. Obviously, a lot of people are considering that, well, they might try their luck. What I'm leaving behind is horrible. Maybe what I find is equally horrible, and maybe not. So why not trying? I think what all this shows, by the way, is that the reason why people take this risk might be so compelling and so strong that cannot be just brushed aside or handled with a very superficial measure that don't really tackle the root causes.